Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Let's Talk About That, a Union University podcast. In this week's conversation, Ted and I sit down with our friend and colleague, Dr. Mollie Carter. We're talking all things social media and students. I think you will absolutely love this conversation between the three of us. All right, Mollie Carter, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About That. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, this is fun. You said you've never done a podcast before.
Not one that's videoed.
Well, here we are in all of our glory.
Right.
We actually prefer not to as well, but here we are in all our glory.
Sure.
Okay, before I came to the studio, while y'all were doing really important work things, I ran to Chick-fil-A. So this episode is unofficially brought to us by Chick-fil-A. Yes. I love Chick-fil-A.
They need the shout out. They're really struggling.
I know they are.
Yeah.
All for help. But when I was in the drive-thru line, I realized I get the same thing every time. Number one, American cheese with fries and a sweet tea. Is this a place that you all frequent? And I need to know what you order because I need something different in my order.
I get a frosted coffee every time I go.
Never had one.
It's so good. It's
Is it?
Ice cream and coffee.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it's frosted.
It's like a Frosty, basically, but it's a coffee Frosty.
Okay.
It will change your life.
Okay. Well, hey, I'm going then. I'm going to get it. Ted, do you go?
No, I don't go. I'm not a big Chick-fil-A guy. I don't like big crowds, and it's always really crowded. So I try to avoid it, but
Stress you out, even the drive-thru?
yes. Yeah, it stresses me out very much. So I was traveling with students a couple years ago, though, and they love Chick-fil-A. Yes. So they insist on going there all the time. And I was driving some big homeschool van, which is impossible to park. And, they insisted that I take them to a Chick-fil-A. And this is after a week that they had spent, going to coffee shops, like hipster coffee, multiple times a day. Yeah. The order's 16 lines long. It's like a personality test,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then we get to Chick-fil-A, and they're like, Cluck, you have to try the frosted coffee. And I'm like, it's just called the frosted coffee? And this is after all the curation they'd done. So I tried it, and they loved it. They raved about it. To me, it tasted like a gas station milkshake, but, they were super pumped about it. So it was nice to be able to enter into that with them. Shout out Chick-fil-A. We love what you're doing over there.
Maybe I like it.
It's okay.
I think it's great because you love it and you think it's great and Ted can continue to do what he does. Or
You should try it, though.
Yeah, I will.
You should try it. You can be the kind of the third voice. Yeah. Report on it. It wasn't bad.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Okay. Anyway, all right, Mollie Carter, you and I ran into each other a couple of weeks ago at a student life retreat, and I want you to tell people who you are and what you're doing here on campus. And in a brief conversation, you were telling me about some research, some studies, some findings that you had, and I was like, oh my goodness. Well, we need to talk about that. Come on the show. And so here we are. But before we get into content, tell us, refresh my memory maybe, who are you? What do you do here on campus? And then maybe that little fun tidbit fact of where you live, not in a weird way.
Like where I live.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that is pretty interesting. Yes. So I am an associate professor of psychology here at Union. I'm in my third full-time year. Okay. I adjuncted here for a long time prior to then. Pretty much a couple years after I stopped being a student here, I started adjuncting here. So I've been around for a while.
Yeah.
And we're also faculty and residents.
Yes.
So my husband and I recently moved on campus.
Okay, so how do you feel about this? I know we don't have students back yet, so you haven't had a chance to absorb all of the students that are here, right? Because you just did this over the summer.
Right, yes. We moved in July 1st.
Okay.
So that was in the middle of centrifuge.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, wow.
That.
Right,
Okay.
we did, yeah.
Okay.
And I've been assisted with RA trainings.
Okay.
Role plays,
Okay.
devotions and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's been a good time.
Okay.
Did
Really
you
looking
enjoy
forward to
dorm
it.
life when you were in college? Freight times?
I only lived in the dorm for a year, and then I was dead set on being in an apartment.
Yeah.
And so
A little independence.
Yeah, a little too independent. But I am impressed by faculty that can live on campus. Would you want to do that?
Gosh, no.
No.
So I've actually done it at every university that I've
That's
been a
amazing.
faculty at. So LMU, I lived on campus. Asbury, I lived on campus. Or just like
That's
right off
impressive.
campus in a campus-owned home. So
Okay, so explain to people why we do that. What is the benefit of this whole concept of faculty and residence?
yeah, so the faculty in residence program exists to foster more connections between faculty and students than just what you get in the classroom, which I think we're pretty good about anyway. But this just takes it a step further. So we're involved in programming that student life does, all the residence life stuff. We can go to everything. I'm already planning for a progressive snacking and
Nice.
things like that, and then we are responsible also for hosting some events. And so I am planning for a weekly contemplative prayer event. Maybe that will happen like one morning a week.
Well, nice.
That's incredible. Good for you. That's impressive. Okay, let me just also interject before we dive into the actual content of this episode. I need everybody to know that anytime somebody tells me I am an associate professor, I don't know, an assistant,
That's a thing.
that's a thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't know the difference between any of them.
Nobody really does.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all a big
So what?
sham.
What is this? People are like, okay, that's impressive, but what does that mean?
So this can vary by university.
Oh, okay.
So here at Union, if you already have your doctorate, you've completed your doctorate, at least this is the way it is now.
Okay.
Then you come in and it's not even this way in all schools, I don't think. I'm not sure that it's this way in nursing either. But anyway, for arts and sciences, if you already have your doctoral degree finished, then you come in as an assistant professor. And so sometimes you get credit for previous service at other places. So I came in with 4 years of credit that combined previous service at other universities and then previous service here as an adjunct. And so I spent 2 full-time years at that rank. And then the next rank, when you get promoted, is associate professor. And then the next 2, tenure and then full professor, they can go either way. I think you can do them in either order. And then after about 25 years of service here, you can apply for university professor, maybe 15. I don't know. It's something like that.
So it's a long time.
It's a long time.
It's kind of like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I never keep up. I never have understood. So
We do the same things.
I didn't get a card from you when I got associate professor, so that's why.
I didn't get a card either.
Yeah.
I just got
no idea. Like I'm like, congrats.
Thank you.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
okay. What do you teach here on campus?
I teach psychology. I teach many different classes in psychology. So just off the top of my head, we have intro, social psych, theories of learning. I've taught stats, applied research, issues in psychology and religion. That's my favorite one.
Wow.
And then child growth and development, adolescent development, adult development.
Wow.
And the list goes on
Yeah,
and on.
on and on.
Yeah. I have a master's degree in counseling
Okay.
and then a doctoral degree in educational psychology. So when you put those together,
Yeah.
there's a wide variety of things that I can teach and do teach.
Okay, so when we talked at the student life retreat, because you were there because of your faculty in residence,
Right.
Right. And so we had that brief conversation, and you said, "Hey, I think this is what we could talk about." And I just remember thinking, "Oh, wow, okay." Agree or disagree with what we're about to dive into, I think it will cause people to think about this conversation, and so I'm grateful for that. So,
Yeah.
okay, where do you want to jump in?
So I've been doing social media research
Okay.
since about 2016 when I started my doctoral degree. My doctoral advisor included me in her research, and we did a particular type of research on social media, social comparisons specifically. And so then once I graduated from there in 2020, I really refocused to self-compassion research. But then last year, I like to say the Holy Spirit gave me an idea for a social media research kind of resurgence in my own work. And so I put together a study that was supposed to be about parenting styles and parental social media mediation, like how do parents parent in general, and then does that impact how they mediate their teenager social media use? And then does that impact their outcomes as an emerging adult? So it's too late for a longitudinal study, right? So really what this was going to involve is surveying emerging adults, asking them to reflect on their parents' parenting styles, ask them to reflect.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. How about you not include my son in that?
I don't know. It was anonymous, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And I will mention this was funded by Union, and I had a research assistant at Davis Popplewell, and so it was just a great experience gathering the data. We gathered data from 5 universities.
Wow.
And so the criteria was you had to be an emerging adult, you had to be 18 to 29, and you had to currently use some form of social media in order to complete the survey. So they reflected on their parents' parenting styles. They reflected on how their parents mediated their social media use. And there's different patterns. So there's active mediation where you, like your parents mostly talk to you about social media use. Then there's restrictive mediation. You can use at these times, in these places, not at these other places, or you can't use it all. And that's really where we're going to go. What we're going to get at today is the prohibition of social media use. And then there's authoritarian surveillance, where
That sounds
where parents actually get their young people's passwords and they look through their social media profiles. And then there is non-intrusive inspection, which is they friend their young people and then they're kind of on the outside of their profile kind of looking in at what they're doing. And so if you know anything about parenting styles, an authoritative parenting tends to be what we call the healthiest style, which is where parents are explaining to their kids right and wrong. They're using verbal exchange to guide their behaviors. They do engage in some negotiation with their kids. And so we would expect that parents who do that would mostly use active mediation. They would verbally instruct their teens on this is what you do and this is what you don't do on social media. So this study that we did was a mixed method study. So I interviewed 15 emerging adults about these things.
Okay.
And then I used that to decide what my outcome variables were going to be. This is exploratory mixed methods research. And then we sent out the survey. And then we kind of used both of those together to explain to craft our discussion.
So, Fran, how did you do it?
Parenting wise.
I was going to say, listen, my kids are 28, almost 27, and almost 24. I remember when Snapchat was born.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember that because everybody was flipping out
Absolutely.
over the fact that you could post something and then it was gone. You know, you could send something and then it's gone. And that was terrifying to people. Now, Ted knows this, that I love social media. Like I've always had every form of it.
Same.
Simply because I'm bent in that direction and it's never been a problem for me. I feel like I've just always had I've had healthy boundaries with it. But also too, I know my kids, they were all going to have it. And it was just more of not so much monitoring. It was just, I need to know how this functions.
Right.
How this works. And so that was my style. And I was occasionally throwing in guidance and information. But I didn't, I mean, I followed them and then I'd learn later, oh, they blocked me.
Okay.
And then I'd have to be like, hey, so-and-so, please unblock your mother. And then they would be like, oh, I didn't mean to. And I'm like,
Oh,
Right.
oh, okay.
Sure.
My thumb slipped.
Yeah, sure.
But also, too, this was at the time when social media was relatively new. And so we didn't know, we were like learning right alongside with it as it was being developed. So we didn't know how to best come alongside them and help them navigate it. It was either, okay, well, we're just going to all figure this out together, or, oh, no, you're not going to have this at all. And we need to all ban it.
I think our generation fell face first into it.
Yeah.
You know, this tends to always get blamed on like the youngest generation, but I think we've got 20 years of data of like us falling face first into it and not doing great with it. So,
Right.
you know, and I think in the early stages, like we didn't know.
All the damage it could cause.
No, we had no idea what it could do to
Yeah.
you or what could potentially happen, you know, that would be harmful to you.
Right.
It was
That's right.
just- We were all learning and trying to figure it out together. That's why I think this is now fascinating, is because
For sure.
part of me wants to go to my children and apologize and say, I'm sorry, I didn't really parent you well
Yeah.
through social media. And I don't know what was exchanged, you know, between them and their classmates or friends or whatever. I have no idea what took place there. So I think now we're at a time where, we're learning some things. And that's why I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation is,
Sure.
what have you learned, Dr. Mollie Carter?
So, one of the most fascinating things that I've learned, and actually, I'm having a hard time publishing it because it's a non-significant finding that really does say a lot.
Oh, well.
And that is that we asked young people, we asked these emerging adults, people 18 to 29, to indicate whether they use social media as an adolescent or not and why. So there were 4 options. Yes, I use social media and my parents were fine with that. Yes, I use social media and my parents are not fine with that. No, I did not use social media because my parents weren't fine with it. And I did not use social media, but it wasn't because of my parents.
Okay.
So, and then, so we put them into groups, right? And the percentage that did use social media as adolescents was 88%, which is right on target with what emerging adults say. 90% of emerging adults report some sort of social media use, and that it's broadly defined. So that's similar to have that in these emerging adults who now all use social media, but 88% said they used it as teenagers, which meant we didn't have a high enough sample size of people that didn't to really tease out the people who used it, who didn't use it because their parents didn't let them versus did. So we just collapsed those. So we had people who used social media as teenagers and people who didn't. And then the outcome variables that we ended up using were social media, social comparison, which is a variable that I'm closely tied to in research, fear of missing out, and social media self-control failure. In my head right now, I'm calling this the trifecta of cognitive mediators. These are things that I think mediate the association between social media and mental health problems. So comparing yourself to other people's most positive self-presentation,
Right.
Not being able to stop the desire to use and to put it down,
Right.
and then constantly checking to see if you're missing out on something.
Yeah.
And so,
And I get it.
right,
And I'm not a kid.
sure,
You know?
Yeah.
Like, so,
Yeah.
not that I'm in your study, but, you
Right.
know, like I think the age is, I don't know that age necessarily matters, even though I sat here and said I've got boundaries and self-control,
sure.
but still, 5 minutes versus 55 minutes,
Right.
I still feel like, look what they're doing.
right,
I
sure,
don't do that, or I don't get to do that, or I wasn't invited to that.
right, yeah.
So let me ask you this. Do you feel like, 20 years of data for you, your entire social media life, do you feel like it's been in the aggregate like a net positive or a net negative for you?
That's a great question. I don't know.
In terms of like whatever we're calling mental health or well-being or whatever.
I think as I'm getting older, that I don't know the benefit of it. I don't know where the fruit of it is.
Sure.
Because if you were to ask me, and I've been on social media today, what have I absorbed that was good and healthy and I remember it? My answer is going to be 0. I don't know what I've read that in the moment I went, oh, that's excellent. Yes, give it a heart, give it a like, whatever, comment on it.
Right.
And then it's gone out of my brain.
Sure.
So I haven't sat in it long enough.
Right.
But what I do love and appreciate about social media as I've gotten older, is just, seeing friends and family post pictures. But I can't decide, oh, I only want to see that. I only want to see friends and family updates because
Right.
I'm inundated with everything. Purchase this, go here, look at this,
Vote for this person.
vote for this person, do all of that. And you just go, what's the good in this?
Yeah.
Which I think is just interesting from an addiction standpoint. Like, why are
Yes.
we doing this to ourselves? Because again, I don't know where the fruit of it is. And
Right.
Right.
where's the good?
Yeah.
So you've been teaching for a long time. How long? 15 years or so?
Undergraduates for probably 12.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been at it for 15-ish years. Have you seen, do you see the damages of this, in your students, or do you feel that they're markedly less happy now than they were 12 years ago? And do you pin it to this, or do you pin it to other things?
I believe there's a lot more anxiety. And I don't think that they are as contented as they have been in the past. I cannot put all the blame on social media. And that really comes down to the big finding that I came here to talk about today, which was when we asked these young people to whether they used and then about these outcomes, there was no difference in social media social comparison, fear of missing out, and social media self-control failure for emerging adults who did not use social media as teenagers and those who did. Which and I hear a lot of parents now, and I mean, I'm not a parent, and so if I become a parent, I might feel completely different about this later. And certainly there are caveats, if a young person's being bullied or something like that, there needs to be a lot more oversight, possibly even prohibition of social media use by the parents. But I hear of so many say, "I'm just not gonna, my kids just aren't gonna do that.
Right.
They're just not going to,"
Right.
and they think that they're doing the right thing. And I can see why. They want to delay anxiety, delay depression, and they think that this is a way to do that. But what about instead teaching them how to think while they're using social media? And it takes a lot of effort. You have to watch a young person and notice when their countenance falls.
Right.
And say, and maybe not say right then, "Hey, what are you looking at?"
Right.
But like, "Hey, let's take a walk."
Yeah.
And while you're on your walk, "Hey, I noticed in there your countenance suddenly fell. Did you see something distressing?" And really have those conversations, because what we found in the qualitative portion of our study was that the young people who reported that their parents did talk to them, it was all about safety.
Yeah.
And certainly internet safety is important. Social media safety is important. The parents were telling their youth, don't add people you don't know. Don't, meet up with somebody and go off somewhere and nobody knows where you are. And all those things are very important. But also, let's take our thoughts captive while we're doing that. And let's guard our hearts while we're looking at social media.
Well, and again, when my kids were young and social media was just really coming alive, we had more of a mindset of trying to catch them in something
Sure.
in that moment,
Right.
which was impossible because you just can't monitor that at all. So what I appreciate is having the type of relationship with your child that's built on trust, that they feel safe at any point,
Right.
whether you're on the walk or you're in the car or even in that moment when they're on their phone, that you have that willingness from your child, that opportunity to say, "Hey, what's going on in the online world? Is anything being said that upsets you? Is anything going on that makes you uncomfortable or afraid?" And then I think that I wish I would have had more of that with my kids. I didn't have that because, again, we just didn't have the tools.
We didn't know all this.
No, we didn't know
really
all this.
didn't.
But I think if your child gets that one time out of you and you react or you respond in a healthy way, then that's going to open up a door to so many more conversations, because good luck in taking it away from them forever. Like, they have to be able to navigate the online world, whatever it is they're reading, watching, listening to, whether it's a Snapchat, whether it's an Instagram, this, that, or the other. We need to be able to teach them how to navigate it.
It's not going away.
No.
And they are going to use it.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they're going to have to use it.
Right.
And so I want them to learn how to use that in my home
Yeah.
or in my office, in my
Right.
counseling office.
And give them and I'm not the one that, I don't know, I have no idea what I would have done, but to give them opportunity and skills, teach them skills, how to think, how to ask good questions, how to articulate whatever it is they read or saw or felt, and then stepping into that space with them.
And teach them that everybody's posting their most positive image online.
Oh, yes, yes,
And,
yes.
you know, those people who are posting positively, if you knew what their life is really like, you would know they have troubles and struggles and trials, and that what you see is not the complete picture.
Yeah.
Wasn't Be Real supposed to alleviate that? That was the big fix.
I got off Be Real. I couldn't handle it.
Really?
Yeah, it was like, it's the same thing. Like, my pictures were the same thing.
Of course they were.
I was so confused when a student did that in class the first time.
Oh, I've had it go off in class.
On?
Yeah, and they'll be like, "Cluck, you have to get in my Be Real."
Yeah, I'm like, what
But
is
then
a
at
Be
that
Real?
moment, I'll say, "Well, the moment you start to curate, the moment you ask me to be in it, you're no longer being real."
Like we're curating, but
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother issue.
yeah.
Curating this life to post, to share, that, you know, says something, whatever it is you want it to convey.
That's right.
But I'll say it is not the source of all of our ills. And so, and maybe I just have a more
Yeah.
positive view of it, because, I mean, I did.
I'm glad to hear this because I actually hate it.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
Well, I'm 35, so I had MySpace.
there you go.
Probably when I was 15 years old.
There you go.
And then I had Facebook as soon as it came out. What was it, 2006 or
Did you
2007?
lie about your age? Because remember when Facebook, you had to be a certain age?
I did not. I was already of
Okay.
age, but my mom didn't know when she found out I got in
Oh man, yeah.
so much trouble.
I'm pretty sure all my kids
she
lied
did
about
not.
their age.
But she did not even make me get off of it then.
Did she get on eventually? Your mom?
She did, yeah.
Yeah.
My grandparents are on. Yeah.
They probably use it more than you do now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about mom, but my grandmother does. My nana
Right
uses
on.
it more than I do.
Right on. Shout out Nana.
Yeah.
I have a burning
Love my
question. I'm on one form of social media, and I want to know if this counts as a form of social media.
Okay.
LinkedIn. It's the only thing I have.
So we didn't hear about that from any of our young people.
Yeah.
I
Easy,
had a lot of
easy.
questions like, does Pinterest count?
Yeah,
Those kinds of
okay.
things.
Yeah.
For me, you have to interact somehow. So
I don't
TikTok
interact.
can be,
Yeah.
because you can comment, I think, on TikTok. And so we have a lot of TikTok users. Tons of TikTok.
Yeah, it's the newest one. And
Right.
so I just think it's also fascinating. What can we possibly create? It's all the same. It's just, how are you, giving the information? It was, when it was Twitter, X, whatever we call it now, like you just typed your little post and that was that.
Right.
And then Instagram was supposed to be all about pictures. Well, now it's not. It's turned into its own thing.
Right.
And then, LinkedIn, I always thought, well, that's just professional people. That's boring. I don't want to be a part of that. But now somehow I'm a part of that because I'm probably afraid of missing out on something
Sure.
that I don't even log into frequently.
I actually have a question about that. So I read this article a couple of years ago called The Age of Average by Alex Merle. Have you read it?
I have not.
So it was about how at the beginning of the internet, 25 years ago or whatever, it was supposed to be this grand experiment in self-expression and creativity. But now 25 years in, what it's actually become is we're so afraid of negative audience feedback that it's
Yes.
hammered us all into this kind of boring beige middle.
Right.
Which is kind of mildly dissatisfying, I think, to everybody. So before you post the ostensibly creative thing, you're like, how is this going to play with my audience? What
Yes.
kind of negative feedback could I get? So it's why all cars look the same now. They're all boring, like silver ovals, and how an Airbnb in Oslo looks the same as an Airbnb in Cleveland. You're getting the same kind of boring beige thing everywhere you go. And I just think it's interesting that this thing that was supposed to give rise to our most creative impulses has actually made us more fearful.
You know what I mean?
I think that's fascinating. And I would agree, because if you paid attention and watched it evolve,
Sure.
and you're like, oh, because now you're afraid of what's somebody going to comment.
That's right.
What's somebody going to say.
They even talk about
Keep it neutral and safe and lovely.
yeah.
Talk about Instagram face, the way that everybody's cocking their head at the same angle and kind of But it's all very fascinating.
It's very fascinating.
Yeah, I got a meme from my son. This is the most gratifying parenting thing. He sent it to my wife and I, And it was a picture of Ryan Gosling, like driving. And he had a very like self-satisfied like grin on his face. And the caption was reflecting on how my strict parents kept me from being a Gen Z loser. And I thought, you know what? That is sweet of you to say.
I am so touched. I am so touched.
Yeah.
Are your kids on social media?
You know, minimally, and we didn't restrict it, but I think we did a lot of talking on the heart level of like, what are you getting out of this? Like, what are the?
You did it right.
Good.
I did it wrong.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Like, I was very cynical about it because I don't like it and I'm not good there. So I'm sure they got some of that trickled down from me. But I think, you know, conversations about like, what are you really after? What is it delivering for your heart?
So good.
You know,
That's so good.
and they've, you know, I think our oldest is 21, and I think he's on it, but it's not a major like driver in his life, and I'm glad. I mean, he sort of has he has a grown-up's perspective on it, I think, which is healthy.
Let me ask you this, because I have boys, you have boys, and they don't post. They'll watch or, you know, get on or whatever, but then they kind of move on quickly. Could you see any difference between males and females, or was it just still all the same? I think guys approach it differently than girls. I think they absorb it in their heart and in their mind differently. But I don't know, because then I think, well, guys can feel left out.
Competitive. and
Competitive in that way.
If I recall correctly, there was a difference in social media, social comparison of ability. So when we talk about social media, social comparison, the way we talk about it now, there's two types. There's ability and opinion. So social media, social comparison of ability is how our attractiveness, our perceived attractiveness, success, wealth, and popularity. And so when we look on social media and we see people we think look more attractive than we do, then it's like, you know, kind of a hit on our self-image. Or if we see people that appear more successful, or like they had a better vacation than I did over spring break, then that is social media, social comparison of ability. Then we know that that's associated with harmful things: rumination, compulsive social media use, identity distress at the college transition. We know that there are problems associated with that. Social media, social comparison of opinion, however, is not viewed to be as harmful, because it's just looking on there and seeing that people have different opinions than you do. Well, your opinions are inside you, inside your mind. And so you can look at that and you don't have to post yours, you don't have to change yours, and nobody's necessarily going to know what yours are, you know? And so that's not a hit on your, I don't like to talk about self-esteem, but that's what we researched. It's not a hit on your self-esteem like social media, social comparison of ability is. So there was no difference between the genders about opinion, but there was about ability, and females do it more, which isn't surprising. If I remember correctly, they both experienced social media self-control failure to the same extent, and females may have had a slightly higher fear of missing out. But I'm curious, even though our own research suggests that social media, social comparison of opinion is not as harmful, I had a qualitative participant say that they have seen political posts and felt betrayed.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm wondering, you know, as we continue on with SMSC research, are we going to see that that looking at other people's opinions can be detrimental?
Wow.
And I don't know.
I think in a pre-social media world, there were just like opinions lived in a different place in your life. You know, opinions lived in the living room with people you were super comfortable with, or in conversation, or they lived inside you and you weren't letting them fly so much. And I think opinions were less a part of image curation than they are now. So like, I think in 2024, especially online, like whatever uniform you wear, whether it's on the left or the right, you're like wearing the uniform all the time, which is really off-putting regardless of who's doing it.
Right.
And so it follows that there would be some sense of dissatisfaction or betrayal or like just angst where we don't need it. Like I feel like I was probably friends in the 90s with lots of people who resided on the other side of the aisle, and I just didn't know or care. And there was something healthy about not caring.
Yep.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
You know, but if we know everything, about the other person, then we know what we don't like.
That's
You
right.
know,
That's right.
and I think this has even implications for how we like metabolize celebrities. I mean, it didn't used to be that I needed my rock star to share the same political views as me, but now like that's in the ether. You know, it's like a part of it. So I don't know. It just makes things like gradations less fun.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to know my favorite athlete's politics. That makes it less fun. I don't care.
You know, but
Where's Dr. Davignon when I need him?
I don't know. Yeah, I saw him this morning. I could call him.
It's just
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
Like, I don't even remember thinking much, if at all. I don't even know at what point this all began, I guess, as a result of social media. Like, even thinking about, what do I think about this? Like, I don't even know, because you weren't forced.
you weren't required to know.
No, I wasn't. You didn't think, oh, well, I have got to have an opinion on this. How do you feel about this, or this? And you're just like, I don't know. Like,
Or you could develop it in private,
yes.
and then let it out in public when you felt comfortable, or not,
Right.
or just sit on it.
And
You
it
know.
was all good. It was all good.
And I think there wasn't the expectation that, you know, the world's waiting with bated breath for Fran Thomas's take on some political
I
thing,
hope
you know.
don't care. And
Yeah.
I hope that if I did share it with you, that you just go, okay,
Yeah.
that's yours to believe based on your life and your experiences and your, you know. But now it's just, I can't imagine as a young person trying to figure out who you are and what you believe in this world of just constantly having to absorb content of some kind that I don't know if they know who they are and what they believe and why they believe it. So
Right.
bless it all.
Thank
And
God we didn't
that's-
have to figure out who we were in
Right.
public, though. You
Right.
know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that happened in private.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were some benefits of growing up in the 80s and
Yeah.
So there is a lot of identity distress when you're having problems like social media, social comparison of ability.
Yeah, for
A
sure.
lot of them. But prohibition's not the answer. Because, and even discouraging use might not be the answer. We need intentional discipling of what do you do with your thoughts, how to recognize them and modify them, and you know,
Good work.
and so there's when I wrote this up, I talked about psychological reactance theory, with especially with prohibition of use. Like, when has prohibition really worked? You know, and so when you
thing.
right, and so when you prohibit a young person from using social media because you're afraid,
yeah, sure.
and reasonably so,
Sure.
or because you just don't want to
Yeah.
deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, and I really don't believe that that's any of the parents that's their motivation.
Right.
But I think fear is a lot
I
of the
think so.
motivation. When you do that, that makes them actually want to use it more,
Yeah.
and they're going to at the first opportunity.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so
That would have been me. That would have been me as a child. I would have said, I'll show you. I'm going to go do it anyway.
I mean, we just did it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even think I had the thought that it would be a problem.
Yeah.
You
no,
know,
nobody
until I
did.
was caught, and then I was like, wait, this isn't something I should have been doing.
Yeah. Well, I find it all absolutely fascinating. I think, like I said at the beginning, this is going to give people, parents, just an opportunity to think about, how did I approach this, or how am I going to approach this, so that my child can navigate it in a healthy way. And you are exactly right, to have dialogue with your kiddos about it. If I could go back in time, knowing what I know now and having the skills, I don't know that I have the skills
Right.
back then. I would have at least began to have some decent Q&A with them about,
Right.
your motive and how does it make you feel and what are you learning? Why are you
Yeah.
learning this to begin with?
Yeah, that's right.
And
Bravo to you.
It is unfortunate that a lot of the literature about these cognitive mediators, self-control failure, social media, social comparison of ability and opinion, and fear of missing out, a lot of the research on that is being published in academic journals. And so, like in certain books that have come out recently on social media, there's just this connection between social media use and anxiety and depression. And emotions don't arise spontaneously, typically. Usually there's thoughts there. And so, you know, you could go to Google Scholar type in social media, social comparison of ability, and articles will pop up, and read about that and learn to ask questions from what you read. Type in fear of missing out and learn about it, and like offer strategies for self-control. You know, it's self-control is something we learn to do. And so help your young people learn the strategies to do that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm always willing to help too. I would love to do talks about this if anybody was interested.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Yes, I appreciate you. Thank you for having
sure.
me.
You're so welcome. All right. We'll see you next time on another episode of Let's Talk About That, the Union University podcast. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. As always, we would appreciate any feedback or questions or comments. You can contact myself or Ted anytime. You can find our email addresses within the show notes. We would love to see you on campus. You can sign up for a campus visit at uu.edu and just search Campus Visits. If you're ready to apply, guess what? We've got a fee waiver code for you. Just simply type in the word TALK, all capital letters, TALK, and you do not have to pay the application fee. All right, you guys, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.